The power failed at the exact second the candles lit the 30 on the cake. When the lights came back, the guest of honor was gone. Streamers still drifted from the rafters at Sycamore Lodge in Deer Hollow, Indiana. A Bluetooth speaker blinked, waiting for a phone that would never reconnect. The cake knife lay beside a vanilla sheet cake with a neat crescent wiped into the frosting, as if someone had dragged the blade, rinsed it, and set it down again. In the service corridor, a steel door stood ajar against a helium tank. Beyond it, a narrow strip of grass ran to a hedgerow in a dark pond ringed by cattails. Confetti squares floated at the water's edge like glittering fish scales. Officers found a broken bracelet clasp under a folding chair, a damp streak along the walk-in cooler gasket, and a mop bucket ringed with diluted pink. A paper runner had been flipped to hide a stain the size of a saucer beneath the cake table. The phone used to capture the toast sat under a chair, front glass spidered, rear camera lens cracked. The parking lot was full. The service drive was empty. The interior cameras lost the room at the instant of the outage. The exterior cameras shuttered and resumed, showing nothing but string lights reflected in windshields. The call sheet listed 37 guests and 4 vendors. None reported an argument, a scream, or a stranger. The timeline was short. The tools were ordinary: a light switch, a doorstop, a mop, a pond. The birthday party ended at the same minute the police report began. Deer Hollow sits between a highway exit and a recreation lake, the kind of town where banquet halls double as wedding venues in summer and community spaces in winter. Sycamore Lodge is a timber frame building with a catering kitchen, a modest breaker room, and a 3-camera security package aimed at the main entrance, the back service drive, and the parking lot. Inside, the hall is open, with a head table along the west wall and a side corridor that leads to the pantry, cooler, and utility closet. The celebrant is Lila Benton, 30, a veterinary practice coordinator known for running tight schedules. Her husband, Mark Benton, 33, manages logistics for a flooring supplier and favors clean sedans and punctual exits. Casey Duarte, 29, Lila's closest friend, runs a small event planning business and booked the lodge. Graham Ellis, 34, a co-worker, handled music and brought the sound rig. Nolan Briggs, 42, catered from his food truck. Tamika Rhodes, 30, DJ, set the cues. The investigative lead is Lieutenant Dana Crowley, 46, Deer Hollow PD, experienced with lean staffing and methodical timelines. The theme is simple: 30 and bright. Sparklers, a balloon wall, confetti cannons, and a gold 30 cake topper. The guest list mixes family, co-workers, neighbors, and high school friends. The lodge lease prohibits propped service doors during events. That clause will matter. Setup looked routine. At 6:30 p.m., Sycamore's manager unlocked the hall, checked the cooler, and handed a fob to Casey. Balloons went up. Tablecloths went down. Tamika ran a sound check. Nolan staged sliders and skewers. The cake arrived in a cardboard crate marked Sparkler Moment 9 occurring. The interior camera, a recent add-on, was set to record to the DVR. The exterior cameras fed to a small recorder in the office. Guests filtered in. Lila arrived at 8:18 p.m., blindfolded by friends at the door for effect. The blindfold came off. The room shouted. She moved along a line of hugs, stopped by the balloon wall for photos, and took her phone back to record the toast. Mark stayed close to the head table. Graham kept the playlist on a steady incline. Casey hovered between kitchen and floor with a lighter in her pocket and a clipboard in her hand. At 9:02, Casey signaled Tamika to dim, lit sparklers around the cake and stepped aside. The room hit the chorus of the cue song. The lights cut. Not a slow fade, dark. The generator in the utility closet coughed and stalled. The interior camera captured a flare of sparks, then static. In the blackout, someone moved with purpose. The main hall stayed dark for just over a minute. The generator caught on the second try. Light returned to a quiet room and a cake with half its candles still burning. Lila was no longer at the table. The first seconds of confusion felt like party drift. A guest grabbed a cupcake. 2 more headed for the bar. Casey called out into the corridor once, then told Tamika to hold the track. Mark texted Lila. The message sent with no read receipt. Graham checked the breaker if only to feel useful. Nolan nudged the service door closed with his hip while hauling a tray. The helium tank knocked the door back open again. No one marked it as odd. 9 minutes passed before concern registered. Lila's clutch remained on a chair. Her keys sat in it. Her jacket still hung on a hook. The parking lot camera showed her car in the same spot. The restroom stalls were empty. The patio was clear. The service corridor smelled faintly of cleaner. In the pantry, under a hastily pulled drop cloth, a bleach bottle without its cap sat alongside a roll of contractor bags. The cooler gasket carried a damp streak. A mop leaned against the wall. The bucket water swirled pink at the edges. At 10 to 10, Mark called 911. The first cruiser arrived at 10:19. Officers cleared the building, counted heads, and locked down the exits. They copied the DVR and walked the exterior line with flashlights. At the hedgerow, a hip-height smudge marked where leaves pressed backward. Between the service door and the hedge, grass lay in 2 faint, parallel compressions, the width of a folded moving blanket. At the pond, confetti squares clung to reeds. On the concrete under the cake table, a paper runner had been flipped. The underside showed a crescent stain bleeding through. Patrol noted what partygoers had not. The cake knife bore a water sheen and a faint smear pattern inconsistent with buttercream alone. The doorstop by the service door matched a rubber wedge from the maintenance closet. The breaker faceplate had greasy smears set higher than the average reach. In a trash can, under paper plates, a latex glove stuck to a plastic cup. Under a folding chair, a bracelet clasp lay on its side beside a single hair. In the parking lot, glitter dusted the passenger door sills of Mark's sedan. The baby monitor-like silence of a party halted in place made sound carry. The louder noise was the generator finally settling into its run. The quieter noise was the first camera audit showing exactly when the room went blind. With no external footage of Lila leaving and no internal footage of movement during the drop, the scene shifted from "she stepped away" to "she was moved." Lieutenant Crowley split the case into 4 tracks: timeline, access, surfaces, and movement. She kept descriptions brief on the board and insisted that each arrow connect a thing to an action, not an assumption. Timeline was unforgiving. The sparkler cue hit at 9:02:08. The light drop occurred at 9:02:17. The generator failed on its first start attempt, then recovered at 9:03:24. The interior camera lost the room at the drop, regained it with lights on, and showed the cake table minus 1 person. The outage lasted 67 seconds. Every action that mattered either occurred within that minute or was a continuation masked by crowd churn. Access explained the outage. The main hall lighting is controlled by a bank of switches beside the breaker panel. The breaker itself can kill power to the room with 1 throw. The generator choke has a particular quirk. A fast pull stalls it. A careful reset revives it. Staff confirmed no scheduled maintenance. The panel bore fresh skin oils on 1 handle. The generator choke lever had a new smudge. The utility closet latch had a faint recent scratch at a consistent height. Surfaces told cleanup. In the pantry, a mop bucket showed a faint pink ring. A squeeze bottle of bleach left a clean circle where it had rested, shifted, and dripped. The walk-in cooler's gasket line carried diluted protein trace. The cake knife edge, under magnification, held a polymer residue consistent with latex and a microsmear that tested positive for blood. Confetti collected under the cake table, blown low by the cannons, showed flex-sized microspatter at the edges. A paper runner had been flipped after an initial wipe failed to clear the stain. Movement mapped the route. The service door alarm registered 2 openings within 15 minutes of the blackout, each under 2 minutes. The backlot camera glitched during the outage, then resumed without showing anyone leaving by vehicle. The main entrance camera showed nothing but milling guests and a staffer stepping into the night for air. Outside, parallel depressions ran from the service door to the hedgerow, terminating at a narrow gap. Within that gap, a bark smudge and a tuft of hair matched Lila's color. At the pond, a thin slick spread on plants near the bank. A diver recovered a handbag strap clasp and a confetti cannon pin tether. Devices supplied silent testimony. Lila's phone accelerometer logged a sudden drop at 9:02:18, consistent with the phone slipping or being knocked from her hand. Her smartwatch registered a spike, then lost skin contact at 9:03:20. It never repaired to her phone. The door controller logged the service door openings. The breaker panel had no digital log. Its smears were physical, not electronic. Statements set positions. Mark said he was beside the cake, fumbled when lights cut, and texted when lights returned. Casey said she lit sparklers, stepped back and moved toward the corridor with a lighter during the blackout to fix a dead wick. Graham said he headed for the breaker when he realized the generator didn't catch. Nolan said he saw the service door ajar while bringing in a tray and bumped it closed, then grabbed a mop for a spill near the pantry. Tamika said her board rebooted when the generator finally caught and she focused on cues. None reported hearing anything that sounded like a struggle. None admitted to the open bleach bottle. Purchases added capability. Casey's business account showed a same-day purchase of extra sparklers and confetti cannons beyond the venue allowance. Nolan's account showed contractor bags, bleach, and a case of nitrile gloves 2 days prior. Mark's bank statement showed a cash withdrawal that coincided with a credit union insurance premium payment for a recently increased policy on Lila with an accidental death rider. The lodge manager turned over logs showing the interior camera recently installed and the exterior cameras tied to a recorder without battery backup. The first physical break arrived at the parking lot. Crime scene vacuum lifts collected glitter from Mark's trunk latch and a confetti square wedged under the passenger floor mat. A reed fragment consistent with pond vegetation clung to carpet fibers near the latch. The sedan's bumper bore a linear scuff with glitter embedded. Inside the trunk, a box of contractor bags had 3 missing. Mark said he used them to haul decoration trash. Casey said she stacked trash by the kitchen for staff. The second break came from the sewer line. A neighbor reported an odor near a cleanout behind the hedge. Public Works opened the line and found a wadded mass of paper towels with diluted blood proteins and frosting. The mass had been pushed far enough to clog flow, then flushed by volume after the lodge's midnight cleaning. The path from pantry to drain now had a marker. A third came from the generator room. A folded moving blanket sat behind a ladder, glitter embedded along its edge and fine plant grit on its fibers. The closet floor had 2 scuff arcs identical in width to a blanket folded in thirds, dragged and pivoted. The closet latch scratch marks matched the height of a person 6 feet tall. Mark is 6'1", Tietjen line. Crowley laid the elements flat for her team. Timed light drop, practiced access to switches, generator stall. Helium tank used to wedge a door, quick mop and bleach in pantry, cooler gasket smear. Knife wiped and set, drag lines to hedge, slick and debris at pond, confetti at trunk. The investigation narrowed from a hall full of people to a handful in specific positions at specific seconds. The next step required hard proof tying hands to actions. A vendor cloud produced the first twist. The interior camera, recently installed, had a hidden fallback to the manufacturer's servers when the local DVR lost power. That fallback captured a grainy, low-frame clip of the sparkler ring in silhouette. When the lights dropped, 2 figures separated from the circle. One moved directly toward the panel. The other stepped behind Lila in a close offset position. A small flare under a jacket hem, likely a lighter, blinked once. The panel figure's arm rose. The room went black. In the return light, the second figure's jacket was missing. Later, a damp jacket smelling of cleaner turned up in a trash bin with a confetti square stuck to the cuff. The cut and color matched a style Casey wore in Arrivals. Helium gave the second twist. The tank propping the door had wrench marks on its valve. Opened sharply, it hisses loud enough to mask a gasp at close range. Casey's toolkit contained a spanner with fresh micro-scratches that matched the valve nut. She said she used it to level a cake stand. The stand had no hardware. Power controls gave the third. The breaker lever bore fresh skin oils in a pattern consistent with a right-hand throw at the height of Graham. His web history from earlier that day included how to trip a breaker without locking it out and generator choke reset won't start. He said he was curious about how venues handle outages. The fallback clip put him at the panel before the room darkened, not after. Cleanup provided the fourth. The cake knife held the latex trace rather than nitrile. Nolan uses latex gloves in the truck. Casey uses nitrile for decor work. The pantry glove in the trash was latex. Nolan admitted he mopped a spill during the search because staff were short, and he dumped it quick into the floor sink behind the pantry. He said Casey asked him to handle it while she found the guest of honor. The wadded paper in the sewer backed up his mop water claim and undercut his innocence. Money supplied the fifth twist. 2 weeks before the event, Mark increased Lila's life insurance through a credit union and added the accidental rider. He scheduled the appointment the same morning Casey put down the lodge deposit. The following day, Casey transferred funds from her business to a personal account and paid a delinquent credit card balance. That same afternoon, a transfer from Casey appeared in Nolan's food truck account labeled equipment rental. He claimed it was for chafers. He could not produce an invoice. Practice gave the sixth. A neighbor across from the lodge had a doorbell camera angled toward the road and a sliver of the lodge patio. On Thursday night, it captured Mark, Casey, and Graham standing at the cake table position after staff had left, moving through motions with a lighter and a hand signal toward the panel corridor. They walked the service hall and gestured at the utility closet. No approval existed for a late walk-through. The clip's timestamp aligned with a text exchange between Casey and Mark labeled Confirm 9:02. The pond returned the 7th. Divers pulled a torn contractor bag weighted with a landscaping rock. Inside were damp balloons, the gold 30 topper, a woman's shirt with a missing button, and an empty sparkler sleeve. The rock bore glitter and diluted blood. The button turned up under the head table during a secondary search. The placket held a microsmear that matched pantry trace. A length of balloon ribbon tied into a constricting loop surfaced beside a fragment of a tablecloth clip from Casey's supply brand. Vehicles added the 8th twist. Fiber and grit from Mark's trunk matched plant material at the pond's edge. A linear accumulation of glitter under the trunk lip matched mechanical transfer from a folded blanket. The trunk weather strip held a faint diluted protein positive. The passenger floor mat held a pressed confetti square with smear at one edge. He had no explanation beyond confetti gets everywhere. The final twist reduced the suspect pool from many to few and set rolls. The fallback clip showed Graham at the panel as the blackout began. The utility closet smudge placed a tall person with recent contact on the generator choke. The helium valve wrench marks tied to Casey's spanner. The pantry mop and sewer mass matched Nolan's admitted cleanup. The trunk and hedge line linked to Mark. A painter's tape scrap on the utility wall with 902 to door in pencil matched the hand that wrote Casey's event notes. A folded square of paper in Mark's pocket noted 902 beside a rough breaker layout sketch. The scheme was simple and timed. Drop lights on cue, wedge the door, move the target, rinse surfaces, dump the immediate remains at the pond, and resume the party enough to claim confusion. The 1 minute of darkness did the heavy lifting. The next few minutes hid it. Arrests followed the sequence. Mark Benton was charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and obstruction. Casey Duarte was charged with murder under accomplice liability, conspiracy, and tampering. Graham Ellis was charged with conspiracy and obstruction for intentionally causing the blackout. Nolan Briggs faced tampering and obstruction for cleanup and misdirection. Pre-trial litigation targeted the fallback cloud clip, breaker and generator contact evidence, and pond recoveries. The defense argued the cloud clip was too grainy. The court admitted it as a business record authenticated by vendor logs synced to the DVR timestamps. The defense tried to exclude the generator choke smudge as meaningless. The court allowed it as part of a pattern of coordinated actions. The pond collection was attacked as a general search. The warrant specified the pond and hedgerow based on observed drag lines and alarm logs. Suppression was denied. The state presented a straight timeline. Jurors saw Lila enter the lodge and the party begin. They watched the sparkler ring, the blackout, and the return of light without the guest of honor. They learned how a single breaker killed the room and a mistimed choke stalled the generator for a minute. They saw the pantry mop ring, the bleach bottle circle, and the cooler gasket smear. They saw the cake knife micro trace and the confetti flecks with spatter under the table. They tracked the service door alarm, the wedge, and the grass compressions to the hedgerow. They heard a diver describe the bag, the rock, the ribbon loop, and the shirt pulled from the pond. They saw glitter embedded around Mark's trunk latch and a confetti square pressed under his floor mat. They learned about the spanner marks on the helium valve and the matching tool in Casey's kit. They heard about the after-hours practice captured by a neighbor. They traced money, insurance rider increases, transfers between Casey and Nolan, and a credit card payoff. Experts kept language tight. A digital analyst explained the accelerometer drop and smartwatch disconnect. A venue electrician explained breaker action and generator choke behavior. A forensic chemist discussed protein positives without graphic detail. A fiber examiner tied trunk grit to pond plant species common to that bank. A video technician synchronized the cloud fallback and DVR. No witness speculated about motive. Each stayed on objects and actions. The defense proposed alternatives. Power failures happen. Parties are chaotic. Bleach bottles get moved. Confetti sticks to everything. The pond collects trash. 902 notes were party cues. The defense pressed the lack of full remains and a medical cause of death. The court instructed jurors that a body is not required where independent evidence proves death by criminal agency and that circumstantial evidence can carry equal weight to direct testimony. Verdicts followed the sequence jurors had lived with for days. Mark Benton, guilty of murder, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of tampering, guilty of obstruction. Casey Duarte, guilty of murder under accomplice liability, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of tampering. Graham Ellis, guilty of conspiracy and obstruction. Nolan Briggs, guilty of tampering and obstruction, not guilty of conspiracy based on weaker proof of pre-planning beyond cleanup. Sentences reflected roles. Life imprisonment for Mark, 45 years for Casey, 15 for Graham, 3 for Nolan. Restitution orders covered search costs and lodge remediation. The court issued recommendations for venues. Breaker panels locked, service doors alarmed with audible sirens. Camera systems on battery backup. Vendor tanks banned without staff oversight. The case turned on sequence, not speculation. A switch dropped the room into darkness. A choke stalled a generator. A wedge shortened a path. A mop hid trace. A cooler gasket held it. Confetti recorded it. Drag lines crossed grass. A hedgerow smudged. A pond accepted what a blanket delivered and later returned a bag, a ribbon loop, and a shirt. Devices kept time when people guessed. A cloud fallback captured silhouettes when a local recorder went blind. Money moved before actions did. Practice runs preceded the party. Deer Hollow will remember a hall lit for celebration and taped for evidence before dawn. Sycamore Lodge changed its rules. Event planners signed new clauses. Vendors lost the option to prop doors. Breakers grew locks. Generators gained service logs. Cameras got batteries. Families who book halls will not notice any of that in the photos. Investigators will. They will also remember to ask for vendor cloud fallbacks. Pull water and sewer lines when pantry floors shine too clean, and swab cooler gaskets that sit at shoulder height beside mop buckets. For viewers, the lasting questions are practical. How many venues rely on unprotected breaker rooms and generators that can be stalled by a careless pull? How many parties create cover for timed actions with lights and noise? How far can ordinary tools, switches, wedges, bleach, and a nearby body of water carry a plan built to last a minute? In this file, the answer sat in receipts, smears, and a silent minute between songs. The birthday party turned into a crime scene because 3 people used a blackout as a blueprint. The timeline put them back under the lights.